It's great to be back at my adopted alma mater, Colorado Christian University. I want you to think about this. If you want to get a quick scan of issues that will still matter in 6 months or 18 months from now, pick up a print newspaper. If you want the issues that people will have probably forgotten about a week from now, turn on your TV set. If you want to get a temporary buzz from something that will be forgotten in 3 hours, scroll over to Twitter on your phone. If you want to talk about, think about, and do something about the permanent things, as T.S. Eliot called them, the things that have mattered for thousands of years and that will matter centuries and centuries from now, there's one place and only one place you come in the state of Colorado. That's Colorado Christian University. We are gathered, and I don't exaggerate, at a campus that can legitimately be acclaimed as the Hillsdale of the West, or the Harvard of the right, or the Oxford of 21st century Christianity. That's how precious Colorado Christian University is as an institution in this community, this state, and this land. Okay, that's established. Now, I crossed something off my bucket list Tuesday night. It wasn't a happy night, but I was able to cross off my bucket list that nagging question of what in the world did it feel like to be General Custer at the Little Bighorn? Golly, it had barely turned 7 o'clock. The polls were barely closed. All this early voting that we have, voting by mail. And the numbers began to pile up, and they were ugly, and they became a cascade, an avalanche, and I had that General Custer feeling. There they were, coming over the hill, hordes and hordes of them. War bonnets, face paint, tomahawks, bows and arrows. Elizabeth Warren in the lead. But you know, when I saw her, I was about 1,024th panicked about Colorado and American politics in our time. I was not panicked for 3 simple reasons, and I don't have a single poll to cite for you. I don't have a single exit analysis to deconstruct. We can play around with some of that in the Q&A. The reasons I'm not panicked, the reasons I'm of good cheer, I have that fighting spirit that Jeff has called upon all of us to have, are 3 things about politics that have always been true and will always be true about politics, at least in a free society like ours. And here they are. Politics is not war. Politics is not optional. And politics is not ultimate. When I say politics is not war, it feels like it, and we can make Custer and Bighorn jokes, but the fact of the matter is, in this free society of ours, with constitutional government, even with spontaneous restaurant mobs and some of the ugliness that constantly breaks out, the fact is, with our Constitution, the defeated side in an election as a given candidate or as a political party or as a movement of ideas, our conservative movement, is not conquered, let alone put to the firing squad, thrown in the gulag. We're at a disadvantage. The levers of power are largely held by someone else. But we have the constraints of that Constitution within which we can continue to compete. We have the beauty of this competitive 2-party system. It has a safety valve for third parties. It has another safety valve here in Colorado, the initiative and referendum process, the ballot, where, as it's been pointed out, the voters showed their good sense on Tuesday to say no to taxes and no to harsh regulation that would have amounted to killing Colorado's oil and gas industry. And they turned down a number of other things that just were half-baked, to be honest. Maybe they would have been a good idea, this 74, this don't diminish my market value of my property. But the legislative process exists to do things like that. And within the safety valve of the initiative and referendum process, we have something really precious called the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. And thank you for mentioning that, Hadley. And they're going to play games with it. They played games when Frank was serving in the House and earlier when I was serving in the Senate. But we've at least got Tabor. We've got the strongest taxpayer protection in our Constitution in any state. Politics is not war. We're not conquered. We're not thrown in the gulag. We're not deprived of our opportunity to compete. Let's get out there and compete. And in that context, we must never allow ourselves to think of our political opponents and adversaries as the enemy. We just can't do it. It's tempting to say we're going to fight fire with fire. What happens when you fight fire with fire? Everybody and everything goes up in flames. Not us. No, sir. We're not going to do it that way. As Lincoln said, a month from Civil War, and who was he addressing? He was addressing people who thought you could buy and sell human beings like cattle. He was addressing people that would tear this union apart and take up arms against the Constitution. And what did Lincoln say? We are not enemies, we are friends. We must not be enemies. That's another way in which it's important to remember politics is not war. Now, secondly, politics is not optional. Chatting with State Vice Chair Sherry Gibson, former state rep, local government stalwart here in Lakewood, Ramey Johnson, before the program began, we were talking about the fact that Democrats and the left, the liberals and the progressives, politics is all-consuming all the time for them. They have a permanent campaign, and some of the ripple effect has already been cited by what Hadley and others have said about the manifestations. Jeff, striking that they've got those demonstrations. People might be exhausted. They might take the rest of the week off in election week, but no, they had to be out there demonstrating about Jeff Sessions, who they just fell in love with an hour ago. Imagine if Hunt had a store that was open 24 hours a day, a gas station and a convenience store where people get essentials to keep their car going and get that snack and that caffeine and keep going. And across the street from Hunt's 24-hour a day is Andrew's 3-hour a day. Who's going to do a better business? Who's going to attract the customers? Who's going to pile up the profits? The analogy isn't bad. 24 months between elections. Presidential midterm, 24 months. Republicans treat it as a big deal for about 3 months. Democrats treat it as a big deal for every minute of every hour of every day of 24 months, and they just start right in again like those demonstrators that you cited, Jeff, that are upset about Sessions. Naturally, the other side does better than we do. John Adams, writing to his wife when he was ambassador to France during the Revolutionary War, says this: I must study politics so that our children can have the prerogative to study agriculture, so that their children can have the prerogative to study poetry. In other words, Adams understood that somebody had to get in and do what he and his wife Abigail were disinclined to do, which is roll up your sleeves and do politics and take perilous ocean voyages in leaky sailing ships across the Atlantic in order to advocate for this new fledged country that most people didn't think would make it. Take all kinds of risks, had to do politics and had to do it whether you felt like doing it or not, because in his case, politics had become war. But the analogy still holds. We have got to see, and I'm glad to know that there's going to be a new activism theme developing here, Jeff, at Centennial Institute. That is wonderful. That is a blossoming of the idea that President Armstrong had and that I helped him implement when Centennial Institute was conceived of a decade ago. We have got to get in there and be a 24-month, not a 3-month per cycle, campaigning force. It's understandable. Democrats think politics is everything. It has become a quasi-religion to them because of the vacuum of religion in the mindset of the kind of people who become liberals and Democrats. And the practical meal ticket aspect of it is they're so dependent on either government jobs or government benefits or government favoritism or government bans on opinions that they happen to find uncomfortable. If you're a Democrat, if you don't win, you don't eat. Naturally, it's 24 months of every cycle for them. What is it for you and me as conservatives, as Republicans, as freedom people? We want to get the politics out of the way so we can get on with all the other dimensions of our life that matter so much to us. It's an understandable and laudable way of looking at it. When people used to say to me, Frank, when I get them White House tour tickets and I said, I'm not your congressman, I'm your state senator, they would be all apologetic that they didn't know the difference. And I said, you have excellent mental health in that you don't know the difference between Congress and the state legislature. Well, maybe there's a fun laugh in that, but the fact of the matter is we cannot afford that kind of ignorance or idleness or apathy or episodic approach to defending our liberties. We have got to take it up a notch. Politics is not optional. And thirdly, politics is not ultimate. That's why I can laugh when other people are gloomy, because I know how the story comes out. And most of us in this room are here not only because we love America, but because we love Jesus Christ and because the Bible is the core of truth for us. And from that starting point, I'm reminded, friends, right after Trump upset Clinton 24 months ago, I had written the talk to console us all in the anticipation that Clinton would have been president, but the fact remains very valid. Jesus was what I would call spiritually lighthearted about politics. At one point, he made a little joke about King Herod, who had the power of life and death over him. He just said, tell that fox I'll be doing what I'll be doing. And by fox, I don't think he meant something dangerous. I think he meant something troublesome that could be dealt with. That's politics. It's troublesome, but we can deal with it because it isn't ultimate. Jesus elsewhere made fun of the Pharisees who said, one minute you want me to dance because you're happy, and the next minute you want me to cry because you're sad. When I won't do either one, you're like little children. You're so mercurial. Your emotions flutter around in the wind. Is that us as followers of Christ? Do our emotions flutter around in the wind, or are they grounded in the understanding of what is ultimate? Politics is important. It's not optional, but it's not war, and it's not ultimate. I came across another fascinating flag for this in the book of Isaiah the other day. The city of Jerusalem is besieged from the east and west by two mighty armies. And the prophet Isaiah goes to the king, and he's got the Andrews message. Actually, I guess I've got the Isaiah message. Isaiah says, and this is from Peterson's, the late great, and we will mourn and lament and miss him, the late great Eugene Peterson that went to heaven the other day. His message translation of Isaiah 7, verse 14, says, don't panic about those two burnt out cases. That's what he says about two kings leading two armies to crush Jerusalem in a pincer from the east and from the west. Don't panic about those two burnt out cases. There is a burnt out case named Jared Polis. He made a little money as a youngster, all power to him. Then he got excited about politics and he's bought different offices. And he's not bought them just with his money, but with a message of snake oil that won't work. And we should be encouraged that it will fail sooner rather than later. What he wants to do to Colorado healthcare won't be pretty while it's being done, but he's going to have to climb down off it just as sure as you're born. And I agree with Speaker McNulty. It won't be easy to undo some of the damage that will be done in the short term. But these people are going to overreach. They're going to fail by overreaching. They overreached. That's why we recalled 3 senators after the gun rights debacle of 2013 and 2014, Frank. Politics is not war, and they're not our enemy. Politics is not optional, and we better not run a 3-hour-a-day shop across the street from their 24-hour-a-day shop. And politics is not ultimate because who's still on the throne? King Jesus. Let's get down to the issues. Fun to be with you tonight. Thank you.